You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the political editor of Wales Online, Ruth Mosalski, and the Mail's deputy political editor, John Stevens. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The Metro declares the gig's up, Boris, as Mr Johnson now faces a parliamentary inquiry into partygate and growing calls from his own MPs to resign. Picturing the PM on his trip to India, The Telegraph describes him as buckling to pressure for an investigation. The Times has a similar headline. The Mail asks, how long can the partygate farce go on? The Guardian calls today a day of humiliation for Boris Johnson. The Daily Mirror seems relieved that some Tory MPs are turning against him. According to the Financial Times, there could be another row over Brexit as the government may introduce legislation that effectively rips up the Northern Ireland trade protocols. The Daily Express reports that British scientists are on the verge of a revolutionary new cancer treatment thanks to breakthroughs in finding genetic clues to the disease. And The Star looks at the rivalry between TV host Piers Morgan and Nigel Farage and their relationship with Donald Trump. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And joining me tonight, Ruth Mosalski and John Stevens. Welcome to you both. Let's start off by taking a look at the Telegraph front page. The headline there, we're concentrating on Johnson buckles over party inquiry. And this is the inquiry that's gone through, well, will be going ahead after the vote into the never-ending partygate scandal. John.
Yeah, it's been a really miserable day for Boris Johnson. I think there's been a real mood change in Westminster. Even from just yesterday, the Tories seemed confident that they'd be able to vote down this Labour motion, they'd be able to get Boris Johnson to avoid this third investigation into Partygate. But something's gone really wrong for them. And, you know, the Tory party's got a 75-strong working majority. They should easily be able to vote down a Labour motion criticising Boris Johnson, but they failed to do that. And I think that shows that under the surface, even though Tory MPs haven't been that vocally critical of the Prime Minister since he was fined last week, that a lot of them behind the scenes aren't happy. And clearly the whips got spooked and thought they weren't able to get this motion voted down.
Ruth, it shows that his own are turning on him, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was a really interesting day, wasn't it? It was quite a bewildering day as well at times. You know, it looked like we were definitely going to have we were going to have a motion and an amendment to sort of, and we were finally going to see some votes and see how some MPs felt about it. And that just didn't happen. So it felt like a bit of a damp squib in the end. Yes, Boris Johnson will appear in front of this committee, but it's the third investigation we're now going to have in relation to Partygate. There's no timeline on any of them. So yes, it was interesting to see that some of the Conservatives have turned against him, some publicly, like Steve Baker. But it was also interesting to see that, you know, a lot's always made, I think, of pictures of Commons benches that are empty, especially during key debates. And you often see them sort of floating around Twitter, you know, why doesn't my MP care about this hugely important issue? But I think it was quite telling, like, which MPs weren't there in the Commons and how empty some of those Conservative benches did look at times. You know, this is a really key day for Boris Johnson. And like John says, on Tuesday, it felt like there was huge support. Boris Johnson was very boisterous. There was, it felt like a change in tone. But today it has completely changed. And why that's happened, you know, there's lots of theories floating around, but no real answer yet.
The Guardian characterising it as a day of humiliation for the Prime Minister. John, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think definitely. And you spoke to people around Westminster today, and for the first time in quite a while, they did just feel there was this stench of death almost around the government and Boris Johnson. People starting to talk again about when he will leave Downing Street. And I think up until now, people had thought that, yeah, things had been quite rocky, but that he'd be able to get through this and that he might get back on the up again. But today, I just think it was such a bad day, and it clearly shows that his support in the Tory party there are a lot of wavering people. And I think that if I was in number 10, I'd be really worried tonight.
I've previously described the Prime Minister as a Teflon-coated, Ruth. Do you think that exterior is being chipped away at? Will he survive? I mean, the Mail's asking, how long can this go on?
There's not a day in Westminster when this isn't debated where people aren't sharing their stories of what they missed out on in COVID. We could all share our stories about the momentous life moments we missed. No one is going to forget where they were on these days that there were parties happening down the street. And one of the MPs stood today and said how much one of her constituents would have loved that 9 minutes, and saying it was just 9 minutes is just unacceptable. And it is. None of us are going to forget this pandemic quickly. And it means that none of us are going to forget these breaches quickly either. And as this goes on and on and on, which it could do for a very, very long time, we're all going to be reminded of that almost every day. And I think part of the problem is that Conservative activists are out on the doorsteps at the minute because there's local elections, and they are going to be being told this day after day and house after house, and that is going to have an effect on them. It seems to be having an effect on MPs, isn't it?
But yes, quite. But John, this does have to come to an end. The Mail asking that question, how long can Partygate go on for? But it does have to come to a conclusion at some point, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think the problem, though, for Boris Johnson is this could get even worse. We know there's other parties that the police are still investigating. The police have said today that they're not going to announce any more fines until after the local elections in a fortnight's time. But we had a warning today from Sir Bob Neal, who's a senior Tory MP. He said that he was still supporting Boris Johnson for the time being, but he suggested if there were more fines that he might change his mind. And the other way that this could get even worse for the Prime Minister is that so far we haven't seen any pictures of the 12 gatherings that the police have been investigating. We've seen some pictures of other ones, like a Christmas quiz that the police haven't been looking at, but we haven't seen any actual images of Boris Johnson at any of these parties that the police have been investigating. And one of the things that this committee of privileges that is now going to be investigating the Prime Minister has the power to do is to compel Downing Street to hand over these hundreds of pictures that were gathered by Sue Gray as part of her investigation, the senior civil service official. And there's the possibility that they could put those into the public domain. And we know how powerful pictures can be. I think that this could be really damaging for the Prime Minister if he starts to think that he can move on from this and suddenly we see a picture of him with a drink in his hand, living it up on these parties. And I think you'll see the wound ripped open right again. And then I think you will start to see Tory MPs asking the question, how long can this go on? And maybe the only way to stop it is by getting rid of Boris Johnson from Downing Street.
Yes, and as you say, possibly that there's so much more to come. Ruth, I wonder if you can comment on the comments of Steve Baker. I mean, they've got to sting, particularly for Boris Johnson, because he's a staunch Brexiteer and credits himself with getting Boris Johnson into number 10, as others do, and he's very well respected. That's got to hurt, hasn't it?
Yeah, he was positioned front and centre in the comments when he made these comments, and he will have absolutely known the coverage they'd have got. The Metro's carried it in big bold letters on the front. The gig is up, Boris. Having an ally turn against him, when I think Beth Rigby put that question to him when she spoke to him in India today, the Prime Minister, and he sort of said, I've apologised, I understand the anger, the lines we've heard him say for weeks and months now. But there's no way that these very people that are close to him and these people that are influential in the party turning against him and doing so publicly. Let's not forget, like we always say with these, that we don't know how many letters have gone to the 1922 committee. We don't know what a lot of MPs are saying. I know a lot of the Welsh Conservative MPs have stayed very quiet. A couple of the notable sort of cabinet members or ex-cabinet members have been a bit more vocal, but we don't know what a lot of them are thinking. So when one of them does stand up, especially someone like Steve Baker, and says something as blunt as this, it is, of course, going to make an impact.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Ruth Mosalski and John Stevens. Welcome back to both of you. Let's take a look at The Guardian and this quite chilling story. Evidence from the mayor of Mariupol as to mass graves that have been dug by Russian troops. He's estimating that more than 20,000 residents have been killed since Russian forces began attacking the city. Ruth.
Yeah, it's another horrific human interest story from Ukraine. The story is that the mayor of the city has said that Russian trucks have been collecting corpses and using dump trucks to put them in mass graves. And then there was a US company that released images of what appears to be that mass grave. Obviously, there's lots of verification going on that is what these pictures show. But it's the sort of numbers that you hear in these sort of stories that are just so hard to compute. You've got the mayor saying that 20,000 Mariupol residents have been killed since the start of this invasion, and that it was only 80 years ago in World War II that 12,000 Mariupol residents were killed not far from here. I think in some ways it's easy to forget that it's not that long ago that these communities were dealing with, mass murder on this sort of scale, recovering from that. There was no way that anyone thought that would be happening, a handful of decades on. And seeing these sort of images, the sort of images we all grew up seeing from the Nazi era, it's just insane to think that we're back there now, and massively heartbreaking. You can't imagine the people there, the families here and around the world trying to sort of look at that and wondering, is my family member in that grave?
Yes, and the mayor saying that it's hard to be precise with the civilian figures of those killed. It's just an estimate, so it could be many more than the 20,000 that he has estimated. And in the article, they're detailing these mobile crematoriums that the Russians are using. Just grim detail.
Yeah, just grim detail, and them just trying to find any way they can to get rid of these huge numbers of bodies of people that they've killed, because they want to try and get rid of the evidence of the war crimes they've committed. And obviously this is still going on. This isn't something that has stopped, and the Russian military are obviously very keen to take this city. It's very important strategically for them. At the moment, there is still a big Ukrainian resistance inside a steelworks in the city. One of the newspapers talks about how underneath the steelworks, there's this massive network of tunnels. It's almost like a city underneath the steelworks. And the Russians are now surrounding that and trying to cutting them off from anything going in and out of there. So by no means this is over. It looks like it's going to continue.
Indeed. John and Ruth, thank you both for taking us through the papers. See you in the next hour.